Every day of your life, you are chasing something you call happiness. You believe it's waiting somewhere ahead, in success, in love, in money, in the next version of your life. You tell yourself, once I reach there, then I'll finally feel complete. But somehow, no matter how much you achieve, no matter how close you get, that feeling never stays. It fades, it slips, it disappears, and without realizing it, your entire life becomes a quiet chase, always moving forward, never arriving. But what if the truth is uncomfortable? What if happiness is not something you're failing to reach, but something you were never supposed to chase? Because over 2,500 years ago, a man named Gautama Buddha uncovered a truth that most people still don't understand. The more you chase happiness, the more you suffer. And what he discovered instead has the power to free your mind completely. The trap you don't see. From the moment you became aware of yourself, your mind was quietly shaped by a single idea. That happiness is something you must achieve, not something you already have, not something that exists within you, but something waiting somewhere outside, somewhere ahead, somewhere just out of reach. And this idea did not arrive loudly. It didn't announce itself as a belief. It slipped into your life through simple phrases, repeated so often that they began to feel like truth. Be happy. Follow what makes you happy. Find your happiness. At first, it sounds harmless, even comforting. It feels like guidance, like a direction for a good life. But hidden inside this message is something far more powerful than it appears. Because the moment you accept that happiness must be found, you unknowingly accept that you are incomplete without it. And once the mind believes it is incomplete, it begins to search. This search is not always loud. It doesn't always look like desperation. Sometimes it appears as ambition, as goals, as self-improvement, as the desire to become better, to have more, to reach further. But beneath all of it, there is a quiet whisper that never leaves you alone. Not yet. Not enough. Keep going. So you move forward. You study, you work, you chase relationships, you chase recognition, you chase a better version of yourself that you believe will finally feel right. And for a moment, it works. You achieve something. You feel a rush. A temporary sense of completion fills your chest. You tell yourself, this is it. This is what I was looking for. But then something subtle happens. The feeling fades. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, almost unnoticed, like a color slowly losing its brightness, like a sound slowly fading into silence. And in that fading, the mind becomes restless again. It does not stop to question why the feeling disappeared. It does not pause to examine the pattern. Instead, it does what it has been trained to do. It sets a new target. Maybe the goal wasn't big enough. Maybe the timing was wrong. Maybe you need something more, something deeper, something better. So the chase continues. Again and again, the mind creates the illusion that happiness is just one step ahead, just one more achievement, one more person, one more moment away. But what you don't see, what most people never see, is that the chase itself is the problem. Because every time you chase happiness, you reinforce the belief that it is not here. You train your mind to look away from the present moment and focus only on what is missing. And over time, this becomes your default way of living. You stop experiencing life as it is and start evaluating it based on how close it is to making you happy. Moments are no longer enough on their own. They are judged. This is good. I like this. I want more of this. This is bad. I don't like this. I need to change this. And in that constant judgment, something very important is lost. Presence. You are physically here, but mentally somewhere else, always measuring, always comparing, always waiting for something better. This is the trap, not a visible trap, not something you can easily point to, but a deeply conditioned pattern of thinking that shapes every experience you have. And this is what Gautama Buddha pointed to when he spoke about suffering. Not just pain, not just difficult moments, but a deeper, more subtle dissatisfaction that exists even when things seem fine, a background tension that never fully disappears because the mind is always searching for something more, and the more it searches, the further it moves away from what is already here. You begin to live in a future that does not exist, chasing a feeling that cannot stay, guided by a belief that was never questioned, and slowly, without realizing it, you build your entire life around this invisible pursuit, a pursuit that promises happiness but quietly keeps you from ever finding peace. The chase that creates the voidity. Now look closely at what this chase is actually doing to your mind, not on the surface, but underneath, where your thoughts begin before you even notice them. Because the moment you accept that happiness is something to reach, your mind splits reality into two parts: what is and what should be, and this division becomes the root of inattention. You are here, but you believe you should be somewhere else. You feel this, but you believe you should feel something better. You have this life, but you imagine a different one that would finally make everything right. And in that silent comparison, something begins to grow, a subtle dissatisfaction, not always loud, not always painful, but constant, like a background noise that never fully turns off. Even when things are going well, there is still something missing. Even when you are smiling, there is still something unsettled, because your mind is not actually here. It is somewhere ahead, projecting a version of life that does not exist yet. And the more you project, the more you disconnect from what is real. This is the paradox. You are chasing happiness to feel complete, but the act of chasing itself is what keeps you incomplete. Because every chase is a declaration. It says this moment is not enough. And when you repeat that message every day, in every situation, in every thought, it becomes your reality. You stop seeing what is present and start seeing only what is missing. You sit in a quiet moment, but your mind says, this is boring. You achieve something meaningful, but your mind says, this is not enough. You experience peace, but your mind says, how do I make this last forever? And in that constant questioning, peace is disturbed, not by the world, but by the mind itself. This is why even in comfort, there is unease. Even in success, there is anxiety. Even in moments of happiness, there is fear. Because deep down, the mind knows something it doesn't want to accept. Everything you feel will pass. And instead of allowing that truth, it resists it. It tries to control the uncontrollable. It tries to hold on to moments that are already slipping away. And this is where suffering becomes deeper. Not in losing happiness, but in trying to keep it. Because the more you try to hold on to something, the more fragile it becomes. You start to fear its disappearance. You start to protect it, control it, manage it. And suddenly, what once felt like joy becomes a source of pressure. You don't just want happiness anymore. You depend on it. And dependence creates fear. Fear of losing what you have. Fear of not getting what you want. Fear of being stuck in what you don't like. So even when life is good, the mind is tense, always scanning, always calculating, always preparing for what could go wrong. This is why the chase never ends, because it is not really about happiness. It is about escaping discomfort. It is about running away from the feeling that something is missing. But no matter how far you run, that feeling follows, because it is not created by your circumstances. It is created by your perception. This is what Gautama Buddha saw with absolute clarity. He observed that the mind is not suffering because life is imperfect. The mind is suffering because it refuses to accept imperfection. It wants control in a world that is constantly changing. It wants permanence in a reality that is always moving. It wants certainty in a life that can never be fully predicted. And in that impossible demand, it creates its own prison, a prison made of expectations, a prison where every moment is judged, a prison where peace is always delayed until conditions are perfect. But conditions are never perfect, so peace never arrives. And the most dangerous part of this prison is that you don't even realize you are inside it because it feels normal. Everyone around you is chasing. Everyone around you is searching. Everyone around you is waiting for the next moment to finally feel right. So you assume this is how life is supposed to be, but it is not. It is simply how the unobserved mind operates, and the longer you stay unconscious of this pattern, the stronger it becomes. It shapes your decisions. It shapes your relationships. It shapes how you see yourself and the world. You begin to define your worth based on how close you feel to happiness. If you feel good, you think you are doing well. If you feel bad, you think something is wrong with you. But both states are temporary, and yet you build your identity around them. This is the deeper illusion, not just chasing happiness, but believing that your value depends on it. And as long as that belief remains, the chase will continue, endlessly, quietly, unnoticed, until one day you stop and you begin to ask a different question. Not how do I become happy, but why am I always searching? And in that question, the illusion begins to crack. The root of suffering you keep feeding. Now if you go even deeper, beyond the chase, beyond the constant search, beyond the restless movement of the mind, you begin to see something far more subtle. Something that has been operating your entire life without you ever clearly noticing it. Because the real problem is not happiness. The real problem is not the world. The real problem is not even your thoughts. The real problem is attachment, not the kind of attachment you can easily see, but the invisible attachment your mind forms with almost everything it experiences. Attachment to how things should be, attachment to how you should feel, attachment to how life should unfold, attachment to the idea that certain moments must stay and certain moments must never come. And this attachment is so deeply woven into your thinking that it feels like part of who you are. You don't notice it when it begins. You simply feel something, and immediately the mind reacts. I like this, I want more. I don't like this, I need this to stop. And in that instant reaction, attachment is born, not as a choice, but as a habit, a conditioned movement of the mind. And from that moment on, your peace is no longer in your control, because it is now tied to conditions. If things go your way, you feel good. If things change, you feel disturbed. If someone stays, you feel secure. If they leave, you feel broken. If life flows smoothly, you feel calm. If it shifts, you feel anxious. So your inner state becomes dependent on a world that is constantly changing. And that is where suffering quietly begins to grow. Not because change is painful, but because you resist it. Because deep down, you want stability in something that was never designed to be stable. You want permanence in a reality built on impermanence. You want control in a life that moves beyond your control. And this conflict between what is and what you want it to be creates friction, constant, invisible friction, like trying to stand still in a river that is always flowing. The harder you try to resist the current, the more exhausted you become. And yet, you keep trying, because the mind believes something very convincing. It believes that if it can just hold on to the right things and avoid the wrong things, it will finally reach a state where everything is okay, a state where nothing disturbs you, a state where happiness stays. But that state does not exist, not in the way the mind imagines it, because everything you try to hold is already moving. Every relationship, every emotion, every experience is changing moment by moment, and the more tightly you hold on to it, the more fragile it becomes. You begin to fear losing it. You begin to monitor it. You begin to protect it. And without realizing it, what once brought you joy becomes something that creates anxiety. Because now you are not just experiencing it, you are trying to preserve it. And preservation is the beginning of fear. Fear of loss, fear of change, fear of the unknown. So even in moments of happiness, there is tension, a quiet voice in the background asking, how long will this last? And that question alone is enough to disturb your peace. This is the deeper truth that Gautama Buddha revealed, that suffering is not caused by what happens to you, but by how tightly you hold on to it. It is not pain itself that breaks you, It is your resistance to pain. It is not loss that destroys you. It is your refusal to accept that everything can be lost. It is not change that creates fear. It is your desire for things to remain the same. And this is why the cycle never ends. Because every time you attach, you create the possibility of suffering. Every time you cling, you create fear. Every time you depend on something outside of you for peace, you give away your stability. And the most subtle part of all of this is that you believe this is love. You believe attachment is care. You believe clinging is connection. You believe holding on is strength. But in truth, it is dependency. And dependency makes you fragile. Because the moment what you depend on shifts, disappears, or changes, your inner world collapses with it. So you spend your life trying to secure things that cannot be secured, trying to control what cannot be controlled, trying to keep what was never meant to stay, and this endless effort becomes your suffering. Not loud, not dramatic, but constant, a low-level unease that follows you everywhere, even in silence, even in success, even in moments that should feel complete. Because deep down, you are always holding on to something, always trying to protect something, always afraid of something slipping away. And as long as that holding continues, peace remains impossible. Because peace does not come from controlling life, it comes from releasing your grip on it. But this is where the mind resists the most. Because letting go feels like losing everything. It feels like emptiness. It feels like giving up. But what if letting go is not losing, but finally stepping out of the struggle? What if the only reason you feel trapped is because you have been holding on this entire time? And what if the moment you loosen that grip, everything changes? That is the doorway the Buddha pointed to. Not a new belief, not a new goal, but a completely different way of relating to life. A way where you don't need to hold to finally feel free. Letting go is the door you fear. If attachment is the root of your suffering, then naturally, the mind hears one thing: let go. But the moment you hear those words, something inside you resists, not slightly, but deeply. Because to the mind, letting go does not feel like freedom. It feels like loss. It feels like giving up everything you have built your life around. It feels like stepping into emptiness with nothing to hold on to. And this fear is not accidental. It is the direct result of how you have been living, because your entire sense of stability has been built on holding on to people so you don't feel alone, holding on to success so you feel worthy, holding on to control so you feel safe, holding on to happiness so you feel complete. So when you hear let go, the mind translates it as lose your safety, lose your identity, lose what makes you feel okay. And of course, it resists. Of course, it holds tighter, because from its perspective, letting go looks like falling. But what you don't see is that you are already falling constantly. Every moment is changing. Every situation is shifting. Every feeling is moving. And yet, you are trying to stand still in the middle of it, trying to freeze life into something stable, trying to hold on to a version of reality that no longer exists. And that effort is what exhausts you. Not life itself, but your resistance to how life actually works. You are not tired because things change. You are tired because you are trying to stop them from changing. You are not suffering because you feel pain. You are suffering because you are trying to escape it, deny it, replace it. You are not restless because life is unstable. You are restless because you are searching for something that does not move. And this is the illusion that keeps you trapped. The illusion that somewhere there is a moment where everything stays, a moment where nothing shifts, a moment where you finally don't have to let go anymore. But that moment does not exist. And the sooner you see that, the sooner something inside you begins to soften. Because letting go is not about losing what you have. It is about seeing that you never truly had control over it in the first place. It is about recognizing that everything you are trying to hold is already passing through your hands. Like sand, no matter how tightly you close your fist, it continues to slip away. And the tighter you hold, the more painful it becomes. So letting go is not an action you force. It is a realization that happens, a quiet understanding, that holding on is the source of your tension. And when that understanding becomes clear enough, something natural begins to happen. The grip loosens, not because you decided to be strong, but because you finally saw the truth. And in that loosening, there is a different kind of experience. You still feel joy, but you don't cling to it. You still feel pain, but you don't resist it. You still live fully, but you don't depend on anything staying the same. Life continues exactly as it is, but your relationship to it changes completely. You stop trying to control the flow and begin to move with it, like a person who has been struggling in water for too long and finally realizes they don't need to fight to stay afloat. They only need to stop resisting, and in that moment, the body naturally rises. This is what letting go actually feels like. Not emptiness, but lightness. Not loss, but relief. Not giving up, but stepping out of a struggle you didn't realize you were in. And yet, the mind still hesitates because it asks one final question. If I let go, then what is left? And this is the question that keeps most people stuck, because they assume that without attachment, there is nothing, no meaning, no connection, no depth. But the opposite is true. When you are no longer attached, you can finally experience things as they are, not through fear, not through control, not through expectation, but directly, purely, completely. You can love without fear of losing. You can enjoy without fear of ending. You can live without needing life to be different, because you are no longer holding life, you are allowing it. And in that allowance, something very quiet begins to appear, a peace that does not depend on anything, a stillness that is not disturbed by change, a sense of completeness that was never created by holding but was always hidden beneath it. This is the doorway, the one the mind fears the most, because it cannot control what lies beyond it, but it is also the only doorway that leads out of suffering. And the moment you begin to understand this, not just intellectually, but through direct awareness, your entire way of living starts to shift, slowly, subtly, but permanently, because you are no longer trying to hold the world together. You are finally ready to let it be. What remains when the chasing ends? Now something very subtle begins to happen, not outside, but inside you. Because when the chasing slows down, even slightly, when the constant movement of the mind begins to lose its urgency, when the need to fix, control, and reach starts to fade, you are left with something unfamiliar. Silence. Not the silence of the world, but the silence of the mind no longer running. And at first, this silence feels uncomfortable, almost empty, because your entire life, you have been used to noise, noise of thoughts, noise of desires, noise of planning, worrying, remembering, imagining. Your mind has always been doing something, always moving towards something, always trying to become something. So when that movement pauses, even for a moment, it feels like something is missing. The mind quickly reacts. This is boring. This is nothing. This is not enough. And just like that, it tries to start the chase again. But if you don't follow it this time, if you simply stay, something deeper begins to reveal itself, because that silence is not empty. It only appears empty to a mind that is addicted to movement. In reality, it is full of awareness, full of presence, full of a quiet kind of aliveness that does not depend on excitement or stimulation. But to recognize it, you have to stop looking for something dramatic. You have to stop expecting a feeling, because what remains when the chasing ends is not a feeling. It is a state that does not rise and fall like happiness, a state that does not come and go like pleasure, a state that does not depend on circumstances. It is simply being. But the mind struggles to accept this, because it has always been trained to measure everything, to label everything, to turn every experience into something it can understand, compare, and evaluate. So when it encounters a state that cannot be measured, it becomes confused. It asks, is this it? It looks for confirmation. It looks for intensity. It looks for something to hold on to. But there is nothing to hold, because this state is not something you can possess. It is something you recognize, and the moment you try to grab it, define it, or turn it into a goal, you lose it, because that act itself is the return of chasing. So the shift here is very delicate. It requires a completely different way of relating to experience, not chasing it, not rejecting it, not analyzing it, just allowing it, just being with what is exactly as it is. And when you begin to live this way, you start to notice something profound. Your need for happiness begins to dissolve, not because life becomes perfect, but because you are no longer depending on perfection to feel okay. You begin to see that happiness was never the problem. Dependency on happiness was. You were not suffering because happiness comes and goes. You were suffering because you wanted it to stay. You were trying to turn a temporary experience into a permanent state, and that effort was exhausting you. But now, something changes. You still experience joy, but you don't cling to it. You still experience pain, but you don't resist it. You still move through life, but you are no longer trying to control its direction. And in that shift, your relationship with everything transforms. You stop seeing moments as tools to make you happy and start experiencing them as they are. A simple moment becomes complete in itself, not because it gives you something, but because it no longer needs to. You sit quietly, and it is enough. You walk, and it is enough. You breathe, and it is enough. Not because these moments are extraordinary, but because you are no longer demanding that they be. And this is where a deeper form of peace begins to emerge, a peace that is not dependent on conditions, a peace that does not need to be maintained, a peace that does not disappear when circumstances change, because it is not created by circumstances in the first place. It is revealed when the mind stops interfering. This is the part most people never reach, because they are always looking for something more, something bigger, something more intense. But what they are looking for is hidden in simplicity, hidden in the absence of striving, hidden in the moment they stop searching. And yet, even here, the mind has one final habit. It tries to turn this into a new goal. I want this peace all the time. How do I stay like this forever? How do I make sure I never lose this? And just like that, the chase returns. But this time, it is more subtle, because now you are chasing peace instead of happiness. But the mechanism is the same. The desire to hold, the fear of losing, the need for permanence. So even spiritual understanding can become another trap if you are not aware. This is why the teaching is not about achieving a state, but about understanding the mind. Because once you clearly see how the mind creates suffering, you don't need to fight it. You don't need to control it. You don't need to fix it. The seeing itself begins to dissolve the pattern, and slowly, naturally, the mind settles. Not forced, not controlled, but understood. And in that understanding, there is a different kind of freedom. A freedom not based on circumstances, but on clarity. You are no longer trapped in the cycle of chasing and losing. You are no longer dependent on moments to define your state. You are no longer waiting for life to become something else. You are simply here, fully, completely, without resistance, without grasping, without the need to turn this moment into something more. And in that simplicity, you discover something that was always there, but always overlooked. A quiet completeness, not created, not achieved, not found, but uncovered. And once you taste this, even briefly, you begin to understand why chasing happiness was never the answer. Because what you were searching for was never ahead of you. It was hidden beneath the constant movement of your own mind. And the moment that movement slows, even slightly, the truth begins to appear. Not as an idea, not as a belief, but as a direct experience that nothing is missing, that nothing was ever missing, except your ability to see clearly. The peace that does not depend on anything. Now you arrive at something the mind has been avoiding your entire life. Not because it is complicated, but because it is too simple. A kind of peace that does not need anything. No achievement, no recognition, no perfect moment, no perfect person, no perfect version of yourself. A peace that exists without conditions. And this is where the deepest misunderstanding begins to dissolve. Because all your life, you believed peace was something you would get, something you would earn, something you would reach after everything finally falls into place. But look carefully. Has everything ever truly fallen into place? Even when things seem perfect, there is still uncertainty. Even when life feels smooth, there is still change. Even when you feel happy, there is still the quiet knowledge that it won't last. So if peace depends on conditions, it will always be fragile. It will always be temporary. It will always be something you are trying to protect. And anything you try to protect becomes a source of fear. This is the subtle chain you have been living in. You chase happiness. You find it for a moment. You try to keep it. You fear losing it. You suffer again and again. Not because life is against you, but because your peace is tied to something unstable. Now here is the shift that changes everything. Peace is not something you create. Peace is what remains when you stop disturbing yourself. When the mind is no longer chasing, no longer resisting, no longer clinging, what is left is not emptiness. It is stillness. A stillness that was always there, but constantly covered by movement, like the surface of water. When the water is agitated, you see distortion. When the water becomes still, you see clearly. The clarity was always there. The stillness was always there. Only the disturbance was temporary. This is the nature of your mind. Not broken, not incomplete, just constantly stirred. And everything you have been doing has been adding more movement, more thinking, more reacting, more chasing, more resisting. So of course you could not feel peace. Not because it was missing, but because it was covered. And now, as you begin to understand this, you stop trying to create peace. You stop trying to force calmness. You stop trying to control every thought. Instead, you begin to observe quietly, without interference. And this observation reveals something powerful. Thoughts come without asking you. Emotions rise without your permission. Sensations appear without your control. Life is happening on its own. And yet, you have been trying to manage it, trying to control every wave in an ocean that was never meant to be controlled. And this effort has been exhausting you. But now, something changes. You stop trying to stop the waves. You stop trying to hold the water still. You simply watch. And in that watching, the intensity begins to fade, not because you forced it, but because you stopped feeding it. This is a law of the mind most people never see. What you resist persists. What you cling to intensifies. What you observe dissolves, not instantly, not dramatically, but naturally. Because without resistance, without attachment, without constant attention, thoughts lose their power, emotions lose their grip, and the mind begins to settle on its own. This is the peace beyond happiness, not excitement, not pleasure, not a high, but a deep, grounded, unmoving stillness. And at first, it may feel unfamiliar because it does not come with intensity. It does not come with fireworks. It does not come with a rush. It is quiet, so quiet that the mind may overlook it because it is used to noise, used to stimulation, used to strong feelings. But if you stay with it, if you allow yourself to rest in it, you begin to notice something extraordinary. This stillness is not fragile. It does not break when circumstances change. It does not disappear when challenges arise. It remains even in difficulty because it is not created by conditions. It exists beneath them, like the sky behind the clouds. Storms may come, winds may rise, but the sky itself remains untouched. This is your true nature, not the thoughts that come and go, not the emotions that rise and fall, not the roles you play or the identity you carry, but the awareness in which all of this appears. And this awareness is already at peace. It does not need happiness. It does not need control. It does not need life to be different. It simply is. But the moment you identify with thoughts, you leave this space. The moment you attach to emotions, you leave this space. The moment you try to control experience, you leave this space. And then you begin searching again. trying to find something that was never lost, only overlooked. This is why chasing happiness can never bring you peace. Because peace is not found in the movement of the mind. It is found in the absence of that movement, not a forced absence, but a natural quieting that happens when you stop interfering. So now the question changes. It is no longer, how do I become peaceful? It becomes, what am I doing that disturbs my peace? And when you see it clearly, the disturbance begins to fall away. Not through effort, not through discipline, but through understanding. You see the chase, and it weakens. You see the attachment, and it loosens. You see the resistance, and it softens. And slowly, what remains is stillness, not created, not achieved, but revealed. And in that revelation, you realize something that changes everything. You were never lacking peace, you were only lost in movement. And now, as the movement fades, even for a moment, you return, not to something new, but to something that was always here, quiet, stable, untouched, and completely free. The end of the seeker. Now you stand at the edge of something the mind has spent your entire life avoiding, not because it is dangerous, but because it is the end of everything the mind believes itself to be. Because up until now, everything you have done, every thought you have followed, every desire you have chased, has been driven by one silent identity. The seeker, the one who is always looking, always improving, always becoming, always moving toward something better. The seeker believes there is always more to reach, more happiness, more peace, more understanding, more completion. And as long as this identity remains, the journey never ends, because the seeker survives by searching. It cannot exist without a goal. It cannot rest in what is. It needs something ahead, something missing, something to chase. So even when you begin to understand everything you have just seen, even when you recognize the illusion of chasing, even when you feel moments of stillness, the seeker quietly returns. It says, this is good, but I need more. I understand, but I'm not fully there yet. I feel peace, but how do I make it permanent? And just like that, the chase continues, more refined, more subtle, but still the same. Now you are not chasing happiness, you are chasing enlightenment. But the mechanism is identical. The desire to reach, the need to arrive, the belief that something is still missing. And this is the final illusion. Because as long as there is a seeker, there will always be something to seek, even if that something is peace itself. This is what Gautama Buddha pointed toward in the deepest sense. Not a new belief, not a higher state, not a final achievement, but the ending of the one who is searching. The realization that the seeker itself is part of the illusion. Look carefully. Who is it that wants to be happy? Who is it that wants peace? Who is it that wants to reach a state where everything is okay? It is the image you have built of yourself, a collection of memories, thoughts, identities, expectations, a mental construct that you call me. And this me is never satisfied because it is built on lack. It exists by comparing, by measuring, by becoming. So no matter what you give it, it will always want more. Even if you give it peace, it will want permanent peace. Even if you give it clarity, it will want deeper clarity. Even if you give it silence, it will want to hold on to that silence. And that desire to hold is the continuation of suffering. So the shift here is not about improving the self. It is about seeing that the self you are trying to improve is not stable, not fixed, not something you can truly become. It is constantly changing, constantly being recreated by thoughts. And when you see this clearly, something begins to fall away, not forcefully, not dramatically, but naturally. The need to become weakens. The need to reach softens. The need to search fades, because you begin to understand something directly. There is nowhere to arrive, nothing to achieve, nothing missing that needs to be added. And this realization is not depressing. It is liberating, because for the first time, you are not moving away from this moment. You are not trying to turn it into something else. You are not waiting for life to finally begin. You are here, completely, without resistance, without expectation, without the weight of becoming. And in that presence, the seeker disappears. not because you killed it, but because it is no longer needed, like a tool that was only useful when you believed something was missing. Now that belief is gone, the tool falls away, and what remains is not a new identity, not a better version of yourself, not a permanent state of happiness, but something far more simple: awareness, clear, silent, unmoving, the space in which everything appears and disappears, thoughts arise and pass, emotions come and go, experiences unfold and fade, but this awareness remains untouched. It does not chase, it does not resist, it does not cling, it simply observes, and in that observation, there is complete freedom. Freedom from needing life to be different, freedom from depending on outcomes, freedom from the constant pressure to become something more. And this freedom is what you were truly searching for. Not happiness, not success, not even peace as a feeling, but the end of the struggle, the end of the restless movement of the mind, the end of the illusion that something is missing. And once this is seen, even briefly, your entire relationship with life changes. You still live, you still act, you still experience everything, but there is no longer a center that is trying to control it all. No longer a self that is constantly measuring and comparing. No longer a seeker running toward the future. There is only this moment, alive, complete, exactly as it is. And nothing needs to be added to it. Nothing needs to be removed from it. Nothing needs to be changed. Because the moment you stop trying to become, you realize you were never incomplete. The only thing that was ever missing was your ability to see this clearly. And now, even for a moment, you do. And in that seeing, everything ends and everything begins at the same time. So after everything, after all the chasing, all the searching, all the trying to become something more, you arrive at a truth that is both simple and difficult to accept. You were never meant to find happiness. You were only meant to see why you keep chasing it. Because happiness will always come, and it will always go. No matter how hard you try to hold it, no matter how perfectly you arrange your life, it is not stable. It was never meant to be. But what you truly longed for was not happiness. It was freedom. Freedom from the constant need to fix yourself. Freedom from the pressure to become something more. Freedom from the fear that something is missing. And that freedom was never in the future. It was hidden beneath the noise of your own mind, beneath the endless thoughts, beneath the constant desires, beneath the quiet belief that you are not enough yet. And the moment you stop chasing, even for a second, you begin to feel it. A stillness that does not depend on anything, a peace that does not come and go, a presence that does not need to be improved. Not something you create, something you uncover. This is what the path was always pointing toward. Not more effort, but less resistance. Not more becoming, but deeper seeing. Because the truth is, you don't need to be happier. You don't need to become better. You don't need to reach somewhere else. You only need to stop running. And finally, be here, fully, silently, without trying to turn this moment into something more. Because in this moment, nothing is missing. And when you truly see that, the search ends. And what remains is not happiness. It is something far deeper: peace.